Welcome to Pesticide, Fate, and Environment, a guide for field inspectors. I'd like to start by acknowledging my co-authors in this project, George Sapar with the Illinois State Water Survey, and Aaron Hager with the ACES Department of Crop Sciences. I would also like to recognize the Illinois Department of Agriculture for funding this project. Now, the Illinois Department of Agriculture has been regulating pesticide use since 1966. This includes a number of programs, but one thing in particular they do is when they receive a complaint of herbicide misuse, they investigate those. Up right now is a screenshot of their website, and on your right-hand side is a link to the pesticide misuse complaint form. Now, these misuse complaints can come from a number of sources, both ag-related and non-ag-related. Up right now, we have on the left-hand side some damage that was caused by post-emergence herbicide in soybeans. On the right-hand side, we have drift from a row crop field into an orchard that killed some peach trees. On the non-ag side of things, you can have a power line cut where there's drift from herbicides that are aerial applied, or you can have damage to trees from turfgrass herbicides. With herbicides, the timing is everything, because once the herbicide's applied, it begins to decompose. The rate at which it breaks down depends on your site characteristics, your environmental conditions, and the chemical properties. And the Department of Agriculture comes into this process just a little bit late because the herbicide has to be applied, the problem has to be detected, and then the complaint has to be filed. Then a number of other steps have to go through before they send an inspector out to sample it. To further complicate things, here's a sample of some of the herbicides included in the guide. Notice there is a very large range between those with a short average field half-life and those with a long average field half-life. And there's even more confounding factors. Almost any factor you can imagine out in the field affects how quickly the herbicide breaks down. And to add another layer of complexity to it, the lab analysis of the herbicide samples is very expensive. So when an inspector goes out in the field, they want to feel confident that if they're going to take a sample and they're going to send it to the lab, that it's going to contain some residue of that herbicide. This is where we came in to help with Pesticide, Fate, and Environment, a guide for field inspectors. It contains information for 35 common herbicides. It includes information on the persistence in soil, the possible mobility in water, and how the herbicide translocate in plant tissues. The plant tissue part can be helpful because when an inspector goes out, they may need to sample the shoots, the growing points, or the roots of the plant, depending on the individual herbicide. Now let's jump right into a fictional scenario where this guide could help out. Let's say a rural homeowner observes early in the week a farmer adjacent to their home is spraying a field. Then later in the week, a power company is out spraying underneath power lines. Then the next week, the homeowner sees there's damage to the redbud tree. Instead of having nice, newly emerged leaves, they're starting to curl up. The homeowner hopes that this will pass, but the next week decides to go ahead and file a complaint. The Illinois Department of Agriculture receives that complaint. They contact the farmer, finds out the farmer applied gramoxone, which is paraquat, on April 30th. He then contacts the utility company, finds out they applied transline, which is clopyralid, on May 3rd. The inspector then uses the guide and looks at the persistence for each of these herbicides. Finds out paraquat has a long persistence and clopyralid has a moderate one. Also pays a little bit of attention to the part about the plants and how it affects it. Using that information, the inspector then plans to go out to visit the site. Looks at his calendar, sees he can make it there the next week, but can't even get samples to the lab till pretty much the end of the month. He goes out to the site, but since he knows this information, he's confident that the soil should contain residue of this herbicide and it should not be degraded below the detection limit. Considering the damage to the tree by the leaves, the inspector has a feeling that it's most likely clopyralid that caused the damage. So in this scenario, the guide helped the inspector know, yes, I can take a soil sample, and yes, it'll be money wisely spent because it will probably contain the residue. What's next for this project? Myself, I would love to update this with new herbicides. We only covered 35. There's many, many more to talk about out there. I'd also like to include photos of plant injury. Specific classes of herbicides have very specific injury to plants. Thank you.